Hey guys, how's it going? Master Cal here, and today I'm going to be doing the 17th video of my 2021 NFL offseason preview series for the Las Vegas Raiders. Similar to the 2019 season, the Raiders started off the 2020 season pretty good, but then they fell apart down the stretch. And again, same story as last year. They had a pretty good offense, but their defense was just really, really bad, and it finally came all apart at the end of the season. They fired their defensive coordinator, and now they have Gus Bradley, who comes over from the Chargers as their new defensive coordinator, so we'll see if they can get their defense fixed. So, their projected starters at quarterback is Derek Carr. Carr's play has improved in the 3 years under John Gruden, and so that should put a lot of the talk about Vegas releasing or trading him away to rest. It sounds like the Raiders would only move on from Carr if they find a legitimate upgrade, which would be a Deshaun Watson or a Russell Wilson. Obviously, Wilson notably because Wilson's agent said that Vegas would be one of the 4 teams that he would only consider a trade to at this time. It doesn't sound like Wilson has requested a trade yet, though, so we'll keep an eye on that. But it sounds like Carr is in pretty much the identical situation to Jimmy Garoppolo, his fellow, who both those guys were actually taken in the second round in 2014 over in San Francisco. Both those guys are going to be the starter next year unless the team can find a guy who is a definitive upgrade at the position. And to get a guy like Watson or Wilson would require a lot of draft picks. So we will see if the Raiders maybe potentially discuss an extension with Carr, who has 2 years left under contract, the same as Garoppolo. Of course, Carr doesn't have the injury history that Jimmy G does. Jalen Richard has a $250,000 cap hit higher than Josh Jacobs, so that's why I have Richard listed as the starting running back. Richard actually saw action on a career low of snaps last year, with Jacobs taking on a bigger role in the offense, so it's possible that Richard could maybe find himself on the chopping block or asked to take a pay cut. Richard is still a better pass protector than Jacobs is at this point, so there is some value there, but we'll see. Left tackle is Colton Miller, first-round pick in 2018 out of UCLA. He's been solid for the most part for the Raiders. He hasn't been elite or outstanding, and so the Raiders will have a tough call this offseason whether to pick up or decline his fifth-year option, fully guaranteed for 2022. At left guard is Richie Incognito, longtime NFL guard, Rams, Dolphins, Bills, and he's in his 3rd year at the Raiders. He joined the Raiders on a minimum deal in 2019 and was one of the top guards in the league despite being out of the game for a year or two, and then was re-signed to a 2-year deal. Unfortunately, he suffered an Achilles tear. I think it was like in week 2 or something like that, so he barely played. So we'll see if the Raiders keep him or if they want to get younger. At center is Rodney Hudson, who's been considered one of the better centers in the game for the past, probably I'd say 5-6 seasons, and he's been a big part of the Raiders' success, especially in the running game. At right guard is Gabe Jackson. Jackson's guaranteed money is also running out. He's got 2 years left on his deal, and after missing some time the past couple of seasons due to injuries, Jackson managed to stay healthy this year, which could help his case towards sticking around. And then right tackle is Trent Brown, who the Raiders signed to a big money contract in 2019 to be their starting right tackle. Brown, unfortunately, barely played in 2020. He dealt with injuries. He also had some COVID stuff going on, and so we'll see what the Raiders do with him. Wide receiver, you got Tyrell Williams, former Charger, also signed a 4-year deal with the Raiders in 2019. Williams has been released. He was released a few days ago officially by Las Vegas. This comes after he missed the entire 2020 season after suffering a torn labrum. He was initially going to play through the injury, but in the end decided to get surgery, and that cost him the season. And his first season in, well, it was Oakland at the time. His first season with the Raiders didn't really go that well. He struggled with some drops, and he wasn't that dynamic as the number 1 wide receiver, which I guess is to be expected because he was the number 3 option in LA when he came over to the Raiders. Number 2 is Henry Ruggs, who is the first rounder in 2020 by the Raiders. He was the first wide receiver selected in the draft, and that may wind up being a regret because he did not have that great of a rookie season. compared to guys like Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, Brandon Ayuk, who all had better seasons than him. Ruggs was not very efficient. He has blazing speed, but he wasn't even overly productive in college. So we will see if kind of his raw attributes can stand out more in year 2, potentially with maybe a true number 1 wide receiver. And then in the slot is Bryan Edwards, 3rd round pick in 2019 out of South Carolina. He was kind of buried on the depth chart in his rookie season, didn't play a whole lot due to injury. Hunter Renfrow, 5th rounder in 2019 out of Clemson, has seen more playing time than Edwards there. And then Darren Waller at tight end, who's been a massive find for the Raiders, a guy who overcame addictions and stuff like that and has established himself as arguably a top 5 tight end in the NFL. Heading to the defensive side, we have Carl Nassib, former Brown, former Buccaneer. He signed a 3-year deal with the Raiders last offseason, and he turned out to be a disappointment. His play didn't particularly stand out, and he was a healthy scratch down the stretch of the season because of his ineffective play. Next to him is Maurice Hurst, a 5th rounder in 2018 out of Michigan, a guy who there's been a lot of hype around him, but he hasn't really broken out yet, and he missed a lot of time last year due to injury. The Raiders only had 1 defensive tackle under contract when the season ended. They did re-sign David Irving, former Cowboy who was on their practice squad and was a call-up at times during the season. They did officially re-sign him after they initially did not re-sign him when his practice squad contract expired. So they have him for the moment. And then off the other edge is Cleveland Ferrell, 4th overall pick in 2019 from Clemson. And Ferrell has been a disappointment thus far. He has not established himself, and he's been underwhelming. And Max Crosby, 4th rounder in 2019, who's been a massive find for the Raiders, is the starter actually. At linebacker is Corey Littleton, former LA Ram undrafted free agent who came up in special teams but established himself as one of the better coverage linebackers in the league, and he signed a 3-year deal with the Raiders this past offseason as a free agent. Littleton did not have that great of a season though, so Vegas will certainly be hoping for a bounce back from him. Then they have Nick Kwiatkowski, who was also signed to a 3-year deal as a free agent. Kwiatkowski came over from the Bears, where he was mostly a backup his first 3 seasons, and he played well in 2019, filling in for the injured Danny Trevathan, which got him the starting contract from the Raiders. And unfortunately, like Littleton, his play didn't fare that well either. And then the number 3 linebacker for now is Ukemi Eligwe, a guy who's been on and off practice squads with the Patriots, the Titans, the Jets. He was signed off of the Jets practice squad by the Raiders at the end of the 2019 season, and he decided to opt out of the 2020 season. Las Vegas actually decided to cut him yesterday. It could be just a procedural move in order to maybe bring him back. There's been a number of guys that opted out that were on like 1-year deals that were released by their original team, so it's possible the Raiders could re-sign him at some point down the line. If they do re-sign him, though, he's probably not going to be the number 3 linebacker. At best, he'd be competing for a depth role or for special teams. In the secondary, we have Damon Arnett, who was the Raiders' other first-round pick in 2020, coming from Ohio State. Arnett was widely considered a reach when they selected him, I think, 19th overall, and the critics were proven right as Arnett struggled, and he missed time because of, I think, a broken hand and maybe a couple other injuries. I think he only played in like 6 or 7 games total. Next to him is Trayvon Mullen, 2nd rounder in 2019 from Clemson. Mullen has fared better than Arnett has thus far. He is a bit penalty prone, but he definitely has a lot of potential, and he's pretty good. In the slot is LaMarcus Joyner, a guy who was with the Rams his first 5 seasons and then signed a 4-year deal with the Raiders as a free agent in 2019. He was signed to be a safety, but then kind of became more the Raiders' kind of nickel guy, but he hasn't fared all that well in the past 2 seasons, and I could easily see the Raiders moving on from him. Safety, we got Jeff Heath, who was a Cowboy for a long time, came over to the Raiders last year on a 2-year deal. He saw some action, but was more of a special teamer. And then Jonathan Abram, 1st rounder in 2019 out of, I think, Mississippi State. Missed most of his rookie season with an injury he suffered in his first game as a pro. He was healthy for most, if not all, of 2020, though, and he was solid. On special teams, They don't have a long snapper or a kicker under contract for the moment. And then their punter is A.J. Cole, who's been pretty decent enough for them. Their current free agents, you have defensive tackle Malik Collins, defensive tackle Jonathan Hankins, tight end Jason Witten, who came over to the Raiders on a one-year deal last year. He has decided to call it a retirement for the second time, but it sounds like this may be kind of official. Linebacker Nicholas Morrow, who was their main number 3 linebacker. Defensive end Tack McKinley, who was a late season waiver claim from the Falcons, a guy who I think showed a bit of promise, and I think the Raiders do want to bring him back and see if they can tap into the former first round pick's potential. Safety Eric Harris, who was the primary number 2 safety for them last year. Guard Denzel Good, the primary fill-in for the injured incognito. Tight end Derek Carrier. Wide receiver Zay Jones, former second-round pick of the Bills, who was traded from Buffalo to Vegas ahead of the 2019 trade deadline. He's had a couple good games as a Raider, but has been overwhelmingly disappointing in the league. Linebacker Raekwon McMillan, another former second-round pick, but this time by the Dolphins. He was traded in a pick swap to Las Vegas coming out of training camp. Linebacker Kyle Wilbur. Right tackle Sam Young, who saw a lot of action when Brown was out of action. Trent Brown was out of action. Tight end Nick O'Leary. Backup quarterback Nathan Peterman, who has been re-signed. Defensive end Chris Smith. Defensive end Vic Beasley. Running back Theo Riddick. Cornerback Daryl Worley. Kicker Daniel Carlson is a restricted free agent. Long snapper Trent Sieg is a restricted free agent. Safety Dallin Levitt is an exclusive rights free agent. And defensive end Kendall Vickers is an exclusive rights free agent. Las Vegas is currently over the cap right now. Even after the release of Williams, they are still $7.715 million over the cap, so they still have moves that need to be made. The positions of need for the Raiders, I think getting a number 1 wide receiver is going to be key for them. The good news is there is a lot of available top wide receivers available this offseason between Robinson, Smith-Schuster, Galladay, depending on how the tags go. And then I'd say a lot of their needs, though, are on defense. Definitely shoring up the defensive line is going to be key. I imagine they'll probably need to find a nickel back to replace LaMarcus Joyner when he's released. And I could also see them maybe trying to upgrade from Jeff Heath at safety. For guys that could be cap casualties, backup quarterback Marcus Mariota is probably going to get released. Mariota filled in one game after Carr, I think, had a groin injury at the end of the season, and he actually played pretty solid, and he almost played well enough to get the win for the Raiders. And that one relief appearance caught interest from a couple of teams, namely Washington and New England. But the recent reports have said that the trade market for Mariota has dried up and that he's more likely going to be released for about $10 million in cap savings. Richard could be a cap casualty. Incognito could get cut. So could Jackson, and so could Brown. If the Raiders did cut those guys, they would have to add some reinforcements to the offensive line. And since the offensive line is important for John Gruden, he may elect to keep at least some of those guys. Again, they already cut Williams. Unfortunately, they cannot cut Carl Nassib. His contract is mostly guaranteed this year. Cutting him would save just $250,000 in cap space. So they're pretty much stuck with him unless they convince some team to take on his contract in a salary dump. And they maybe add a pick in there to spice it up. I don't see that happening personally. I do not think they'll cut Kwiatkowski. Littleton's contract isn't cuttable. I am very sure they'll cut Joyner, and my guess is they're going to cut Heath as well. So that's going to do it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed, and hope you'll stay tuned for the next off-season preview video.